me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, the counter-terrorism SARS today raised concerns that essentially too many people in this country seem to be supporting Hamas and that may lead to the spread of extremism here in the UK. Is he right? Do you agree with that? And if so, what should we do about it? Also tonight, should your passport picture be used to determine whether you are a criminal? Maybe by cross-checking it with facial recognition software and CCTV, for example. Is that futuristic crime fighting or a breach of your confidentiality? And over in Wales, Welsh Water have confessed to illegally spilling sewage. For years, those greedy water companies, right? Nationalise them, say many, that'll fix it. But hang on a second, Welsh Water is not for profit. So what then is the answer? And Bibi Stockholm, despite Just Stop Oil's best efforts, yeah, you heard me right, migrants are back on board. The government basically said if they refused, their support would end. Right move or not? We'll have it all to come and more. But before we get into all that, let's grab tonight's latest headlines.
Very good evening to you. It is 6 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak is in Saudi Arabia for talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman as his shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East continues. Earlier in Jerusalem, the Prime Minister told Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu he welcomed the decision to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza from Egypt and said the UK stood in solidarity with Israel. And Mr Netanyahu thanked him for visiting the country, calling it a strong statement of support in a dark time. Rishi Sunak, though, stressed that Israel must adhere to international law in Gaza and that the conflict must not spread elsewhere.
I've had good, productive conversations with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli President Herzog. Among other things, we discussed the importance of this conflict not escalating regionally and the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza to help people who need it. I also had the opportunity to meet families of British nationals who have been taken hostage. We're doing absolutely everything we can to get them home.
9 Britons are now known to have died in the Hamas attacks that took place earlier this month, with 7 still missing. Meanwhile, Israel's continued its aerial assault on Gaza. A warning some viewers may find the following images distressing. Well, Palestinian authorities say more than 3,700 people have died in Gaza and some 12,000 have been injured. Approximately 1 million people have been displaced, with the UN warning food, water and medicine is in critically short supply. Now, hundreds of aid lorries are queuing at the Rafah crossing, which connects Gaza with Egypt, but it's unclear when the border will open as Israel continues its total siege of the enclave. Families of children and teenagers held captive in the Gaza Strip have been holding a press conference in Tel Aviv. Israel says 1,400 of its citizens were killed in the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, while it's understood 200 people have been taken hostage. One Israeli mother begged Hamas to release her kidnapped children.
The whole world have to scream and to ask for humanity. And I think, and I pray, and I beg in, and I ask, even Hamas, this moment you have the opportunity to show that you still have humanity. I'm asking the whole world and your voice to scream till the sky is open. Bring our children home.
Well, the Foreign Secretary has held talks with his Egyptian counterpart to discuss the ongoing conflict. James Cleverly visited Israel last week and will travel to Turkey and Qatar over the coming days to seek a peaceful resolution. The UK says the 3 countries are vital to international efforts to uphold regional stability, also to free hostages and allow humanitarian access to Gaza. The French President Emmanuel Macron attended the funeral of a teacher who was stabbed and killed in a suspected Islamist attack last week. Dominique Bernard was stabbed to death 6 days ago in the northern city of Arras. President Macron and his wife spoke to the teacher's family ahead of the ceremony, also attended by Bernard's students, each carrying a white rose. The suspect is under formal investigation for murder. France has been on its highest state of alert since the attack. Asylum seekers have returned to the Bibby Stock home in Portland despite activists attempting to prevent it from happening. Just Stop Oil protesters obstructed a coach carrying migrants holding banners reading "No prison ships" and "Demand humanity." All 39 people were removed from the barge in August after Legionella bacteria was discovered. 11 illegal migrants have been arrested while working at a top London hotel. The agency staff were arrested by immigration officers at the London Marriott Hotel in Regent's Park. They were employed illegally as cleaners, porters and maids, working 15-hour days through third-party recruitment agencies. 5 were detained pending deportation, while a further 6 were bailed. None of them have the right to work in the UK. Concrete that could be at risk of collapse has been identified in a further 40 schools in colleges across England. The Department for Education says the latest figures on the concrete, known as RAC, brings the total to 214. The latest update from ministers in September had that number at 174. And an evacuation order has been put in place for all residents in the Scottish town of Brecon. And more than 400 homes have been asked to leave due to the unprecedented level of rain that's expected to fall in the area. Aberdeenshire Council says it will be setting up rest centres in Stonehaven and Lawrence Kirk for those who are unable to remain in their homes. A rare red weather warning has been issued as Storm Babette approaches. It's likely to cause severe flooding and a risk to life in some parts of Scotland. We are on TV, on digital radio, and if you want us on your smart speaker, just say play GB News. That's it from me. Now, over to Michelle.
Thanks for that. I'm Michelle Dewbs. I'm with you till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, the PR consultant Alex Dean and also the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you.
You know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home. What's on your mind tonight? All the usual ways. You can reach me, gbviews at gbnews.com is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I want to talk to you specifically about here in the UK and the amount of support or seemingly lack of strong criticism when it comes to Hamas, and whether or not that is potentially going to start spreading extremism here in this country. Before I get into all of that, which will be in just a couple of moments, let's bring ourselves up to speed, though, shall we, with the latest goings-on over in Israel. Charlie Peters is live in Tel Aviv. Good evening, Charlie. Bring us up to speed.
So today, obviously, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in country for that long-awaited diplomatic visit after US President Joe Biden arrived yesterday. And Sunak told Netanyahu that we want you to win. He also reaffirmed that he was glad to hear that Israel had agreed to the opening of humanitarian aid from Egypt into the Gaza Strip via the Rafah border crossing. But since that announcement over 24 hours ago, we have not had confirmation of when aid will arrive into the Gaza Strip, which is experiencing what the UN and other international observers have described as an untenable humanitarian crisis. A UN chief said 4 days ago that the spectre of death is looming over the territory, and the scenes from the south of Gaza in particular, where people have been ordered to flee by the IDF, are extremely disturbing. The IDF say they have established a humanitarian safe zone on the coast in Al-Muwazi, but how people will get there and how, more crucially, aid will get there is yet to be determined. But in the rest of the country, in the south, we have heard in the last 2 hours from Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, who told troops gathering on that border, some were over 100,000 with armoured convoys as well. He said, "You are looking at Gaza from afar, but soon you will see it from the inside." Another general also reaffirmed a similar message to troops in what is the clearest stance taken by Israeli political and military leaders about their upcoming plans in the Gaza Strip since this conflict began. While he made those comments, in the north, some 30 missiles have been fired from southern Lebanon into Israeli territory. Today, after a relative lull in the morning, there was one barrage of 11 rockets where the Iron Dome missile air defense system failed to intercept some rockets which landed in northern Israel, and some people were injured there. This was claimed by Hamas, but Lebanese Hezbollah have also been active on that border region. We have seen the continuation of protests throughout the Arab world, in Baghdad, in Cairo, in Beirut, and we've also seen uprisings in the West Bank. In Ramallah, we have seen hundreds of people being arrested by the Israeli authorities on suspicion of being associated with or members of Hamas. Overnight, they arrested dozens and claimed arms and munition associated with the terror group. But there are also more concerning developments beyond the near region here in Iraq and Syria, where there have been claims by Iranian proxy groups that missile attacks and suicide drone attacks have been successfully launched on American bases. Now, the US yesterday originally denied that any injuries had taken place, but have since confirmed that some troops were being assessed for injuries after one of those strikes was intercepted over a base in northern Iraq, whereas there were 2 missile strikes in East Syria for the some 900 American troops in that country. If an American soldier is more severely injured, or if there are severe casualties in Iraq and Syria, that will be a major escalation threat in this conflict as the war rages on and that ground invasion looks likely. Iran is certainly acting further and warning Israel not to continue its aggression on the Gaza Strip.
Charlie Peters, fascinating insight. As always, thanks for that, and do stay safe. Thank you. Of course, then, we've just been mentioning Rishi Sunak has been speaking out over in Israel today. I'm going to summarise what he said with just a very simple sentence or two. Listen.
The last thing for me to close on is this. You describe this as Israel's darkest hour. Well, then it's for me to say I'm proud to stand here with you in Israel's darkest hour. As your friend, we will stand with you in solidarity, we will stand with your people, and we also want you to win.
Yeah, so one of the things that I found interesting today is the UK's counter-terrorism star, basically, he is saying that within the streets of Britain, there are a few too many people, basically, either supporting directly Hamas or, by definition, not really criticising Hamas to the level of which one would perhaps expect. He's raising concerns, therefore, that perhaps this is going to allow extremism to fester and to kind of develop on our streets, of course, therefore, putting many of us at risk. Now, I'm going to turn to you directly first, Aaron Bastani, because, and I shall be very transparent with you, I've hosted Novara Media a fair bit on my show, as regular viewers will be aware. And over this past week or so, I've had an enormous amount of criticism for doing so. I've got a couple of emails that I've had one a second ago from Tina when she saw that you were on the panel as well. But many people are writing things like the following. This is Richard. Why do you keep platforming Novara Media? They are far-left racists who promote hatred. For example, and many people keep referring to that tweet from one of your editors, Rivka Brown. So what would you say to the people that are telling me that Novara shouldn't be here because you're basically, exactly as Richard is saying, you're far left, essentially racist that don't condemn Hamas?
Well, I'm very happy to condemn Hamas. That's the first thing off the bat. I'm very happy to do that. And I'm very worried about the prospect or the possibility of the kind of enmity that you see in West Asia and the Middle East coming here to the UK. Broadly speaking, this is a very safe country. People have rights to protest, freedom of association. They can get on with life. That's why lots of people want to come here. And I want to keep it that way. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a great country. I'm very proud and privileged to call myself British. In terms of whether or not I come on your show, that's obviously at your discretion. I'm very clearly on the left. I certainly don't think I'm a racist. And I would say to the first comment you read there, you know, I'm responsible for what I say and not for anybody else. Now, in terms of what my colleague Rivka Brown said, it was a tweet. It wasn't on Novara Time.
I want to remind people who didn't see it. She basically said, among other things, that today, i.e. October the 7th, when Hamas did that appalling terrorist attack, she called that basically a day for celebration. Yeah, she deleted that and apologised. She's Jewish. And why would you think that? I mean, I know you're not inside her brain, but why would you even think that? Never mind, think, oh, you know what, not only do I think that, I'm going to write it and share it with the nation. She doesn't, she's told me she doesn't think that anymore. And she saw the bulldozer going through the border fence between Gaza and Israel. She saw that and she tweeted a very stupid thing. Again, what I'd say is, and this is, again, it's entirely up for people to discern for themselves. If somebody offers apologies, if they ask for forgiveness, that's then up to the other person to say, I forgive you or not. That's up to them, but that's the best that she can do, and that's what she's done. Michael Walker, for example, he was on with Jacob Rees-Mogg the other day, Monday, I think it was this week. Jacob Rees-Mogg asked him directly, obviously everyone agrees that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and Michael wouldn't concede that point. He'd concede that there was a terrorist act that had been committed, but really did stop short of saying, yes, it's a terrorist organisation. What do you think to that? Because, of course, this is all coming under the umbrella of Novara. So neither of those two instances. What I'd say is actually for people watching, you know, we have a YouTube show. People should feel free to watch it. I'm not trying to steal your viewers, Michelle. And there's more than 1 hour in the day. People can watch many different things. We're regulated, and we're both on YouTube. We're regulated by Impress. So obviously the standard of journalism and fact-checking and whatnot is very high on our show. And what Rivka did was obviously fall very short of that. In terms of Michael, I mean, I don't know what he said or didn't say. I saw some clips on social media. I didn't see the whole thing. I would just overtly say Hamas is, a terrorist organisation that's prescribed in this country under law, but clearly, indisputably, it's an organisation which has used terror against civilian populations in order to achieve its political aims. That is the definition of a terrorist organisation. So I don't really see how one could argue against that. So I'm going to come back to you on that, but I just want to broaden this out and make it more about the left more generally, because...
Well, Michelle, before you do, in my view, Aaron is quite plainly not a racist. I've known him for some time, and I think that he's someone well within the parameters of normal discourse in this country. And I do think, though, it's fair to give you the opportunity to reply about what people have thought about what your colleagues have. After all, you work together, and if a colleague of mine at my organisation had said something similar, I would well and truly expect that question. I suppose the reason people, including myself, were upset to read what she wrote was first that when someone apologises for something like that, you naturally think you're not sorry, you don't no longer think that you're wrong. You're sorry because you got caught. You're sorry because you've been made to say sorry. That's the first thing. And the second thing was that when she wrote, on the very day that Hamas went and killed all those people at that festival, today should be a day of celebration. You know, young and old, different backgrounds, people massacred there. And then another 150-odd kidnapped. I mean, the idea that's something that someone would celebrate, I just think is repellent, and that's why, whilst I don't attribute any of that to you, I think it's fair for people to ask you what you think about it.
So move this off from Navarra and make it more broadly about the left, because what Robin was saying this morning, Robin Simcox, the counter-extremism.
Yes, I read his statement and it's extraordinary.
Yeah. So I find this quite interesting because he's basically saying that not enough people are condemning Hamas and all the rest of it, and as a result, therefore, the population in the UK are at heightened risk.
He has gone further and said that prominent people in the United Kingdom are praising the evil ideology of Hamas and excusing its barbarism. I mean, it's really robust. I would say this, there are...
While you're talking, by the way, just to explain to viewers, I'm going to show you some live footage now. This is a protest, I think it's in Paris, actually, and this is taking place as we speak.
There are some people on the left who see Hamas for what it is, and there are some people on the right who are actively hostile towards Israel. But in answer to your question about the left in this country, it's plain, broadly speaking, I think that there's more support not just for Gaza but for Hamas specifically on the left, and there's more support for Israel and hostility towards Hamas on the right, broadly speaking. In terms of UK safety, which was your introduction to this package, my initial reaction was, you know, so what, or whatever people say, it's a prescribed terrorist organisation, we'll take care of ourselves and we know what Hamas is. But actually, when I see, you know, signs put on doors of Jewish people in Berlin, or shops in my own beloved London, in North London, vandalised because their owners are Jewish. As a Jewish friend of mine said this week, this is how it starts.
It is. And we were talking about one of these protests on my first day back from my holiday, and I was saying that I'd seen this picture of these girls and they had this paratrooper thing, sellotape to the back, and I was saying, you know, maybe they didn't realise it was there. Well, I take that back, because there's no way that those people didn't realise that those stickers was there. It was also on the front of the placard thing, the stick that she was holding up. And I just find that absolutely abhorrent, that people are basically celebrating that horrendous act of terrorism. And to this counter-extremism guy's point, do you actually think that it's given, because he says, and I think it's quite interesting, there's less of a stigma about supporting Hamas than there would be any other terrorist organisation in the land, and therefore people perhaps are making the case that certain things are all right when clearly they're not. Is that fair?
It's a really interesting one, because I think that's probably true. And I think that's because of the criminal nature by which the Israeli state often acts. So people say you have war crimes or you have illegal settlements by Israel, ergo this is legitimate, whereas with ISIS, or with any other terrorist organisation, employing the exact same means, people say, well, what's that in response to that? It just seems outrageous that you would be destroying cities in Syria, or despoiling historic ruins, or, you know, forcing women into marriage and so on. Here, whether or not you agree, and I think Alex put it very rightly, there is clearly a sort of political, you know, there's a political difference here between left and right on this. I think people treat it differently because they see it as responding to something quite unique. That's not a comment on whether or not one should see it as legitimate or not. In terms of those two young women, again, outrageous. And what I'd also add is, how does that help Palestinians? How does that help Palestine? How does that help human rights, legal rights, peace, prosperity in Gaza or the West Bank? It clearly doesn't. So I think that's just a very stupid thing for them to have done. And I would want to distinguish between the millions of people, frankly, in this country. You know, we had a poll out today. Over 70% of people want a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, or let's say between Israel, basically Israel and, you know, the population of Gaza at this point, because obviously it's mostly one way. Understandably, given what happened on the 7th of October, a big majority of people favour a ceasefire, and I would be very reluctant to see the millions of decent people who agree with that position be libelled and labelled as apologists for Hamas. And I'll finish with this. We live in a brilliant country. OK, I can say things, or Alex can say things, you can say things, people can disagree, and you can broadly get on with your life. That is incredibly, incredibly precious. And I'm very worried, from both sides of this debate, that some people would seek to undermine that by clamping down on the right to protest, or by saying that it's unimportant, we should prohibit protests in regards to what's going on in the Middle East. And then from the other side, where people actually don't value those rights to protest and in some ways abuse them.
Yeah.
Just hold that thought for 2 seconds.
Sure.
When I say 2 seconds, I actually mean 2 minutes.
Sure.
I'm going to take a break, but when we come back, Alex will respond. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Self-defense.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7. Alongside me, Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani remain. Just before the break, we were talking a lot about the situation in the UK and about basically whether or not we're becoming less safe because of people's or certain people's reluctance to directly condemn Hamas. We were just talking. Alex, you wanted to respond.
Well,
so go ahead.
Aaron was saying that some people feel the way they feel about Hamas because of the way they feel about Israel. And there is some truth to that. I mean, some people don't treat Hamas like they treat other terror organisations because of their feelings about Israel. So far, so true. You know, but you don't. First of all, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and one could concede lots of things that have been said about the state of Israel, surrounded by enemies, perpetually fighting wars to survive, and still say it is wrong to use violence against it, let alone to people who dig up the water pipes the international community have given them and turn them into rockets. I think, you know, 2 wrongs don't make a right is taken to a true extreme when people are beheading babies and kidnapping children. But, you know, you don't have to be anti-Semitic to be hostile to Israel. but it certainly helps. And I think that the point is, some see Israel as, they see Israel so negatively that those opposed to Israel attract their sympathy no matter how extreme their opposition might be.
And you know, Richard has just messaged in and said, when it comes to this subject, everyone now seems to be an armchair experts fanning the flames of misinformation. He says this situation is incredibly dangerous for the world at large. And I think that's a really key point, because overnight, everyone popping up has seemingly become this expert in the history, which is, it's a very complex history. And most people are not abreast of that situation. For, you know, the reality is, and people may or may not like this, the situation didn't just commence on October the 7th, as some people believe that it did. And I think the whole misinformation thing and the propaganda at large, particularly with social media, is incredibly dangerous. And some of the things that are happening and circulating right now, this is a matter of life and death and escalation versus de-escalation. Do you think that balance is being struck well or not?
Well, one of the things I like about the UK is that people are generally prone to temperance, goodwill, thoughtfulness. I have to say the response to all of this, well, the protests, I should say, from some members of the government haven't been in keeping with that. And it does make me worry. What are you on about? So, for instance, I think a sensitive, intelligent politician would say, I don't agree with these people protesting. They have a right to do it, and I'm sure...
Protesting what?
This protest on Saturday in London, that's right. But they have a right to do it. I'm sure there are some bad people there, but I'm sure there are many good ones too. I think it's a perfectly sensible... I happen to think that. I think that's a perfectly sensible position to hold. But instead, what we've had, including from the BBC, by the way, the BBC had to apologise for this on air, is to say that that was a protest in support of Hamas, which it clearly wasn't. You know, I know Jewish people who support the State of Israel who were on that demonstration, healthcare workers, all kinds of quote-unquote normal people. So I do think that there are issues here, of course. You know, you talked about those two young women with the paragliders in their back and so that shouldn't be happening. But I would be worried that those flames are being fanned by parts of the media, some individuals within the government, political figures, political influences. Because frankly, and this is my experience, I'm sure it's your experience too. I mean, you know this very well. You speak to your audience every day of the week. The vast majority of people in this country are decent, regardless of their skin colour or background. They just want to get on in life. They just want to do what's best for their family. They might want to contribute to their community if they have a little bit extra cash in their back pocket. And they want to leave the world a better place than when they arrived. That's it. And so I am very worried about people trying to ramp this up into something that it perhaps isn't.
Well, the part of the difficulty, it seems to me, it's very hard to police, right? Because you are right. People have the freedom to protest in this country, and that's a vital right. We have also formally prescribed Hamas as a terrorist organisation, and supporting it and glorifying violence conducted by it is a criminal offence. Yeah. So those responsible for policing such events, looking at tens of thousands of people, will look at somebody saying something about Palestine, OK, tick, so far, perhaps saying something critical about Israel, OK, tick, fine so far. The moment is that glorification? Is that supporting terrorism? And at that point, it's an arrestable offence. You're supposed to go and feel somebody's collar. Very difficult. And I'm not normally very sympathetic to the police.
What about the fact that, have you seen the whole setup around the cenotaphs? It was all the
disgraceful, should never be allowed. The cenotaph is a sacred space in our country meant to glorify our glorious dead. And I think it's utterly wrong to allow people to politicise it and tin-eared and crass to the extreme to have done what was done. And any normal authority would have swept it away in a moment. Sometimes I can't believe it, I'm saying this, sometimes you envy the French and their willingness to just, right, we're going to clear that out now. They wouldn't have had it for a day on the Champs-Élysées.
What do you think is the situation of the protesting around the cenotaph?
Well, I think that was where the sort of base camp was, and that's ultimately at the discretion of the police and the local council. I agree with Alex, it's a very strange choice. But obviously they thought there was no problem with it. But I can only say that what with the sort of backlash, that won't be happening again.
You have to have a brain of stone to think there is no problem with doing that at the cenotaph. It's extraordinary to me.
And what about this whole... because, I mean, the emotions around this situation are immense, very understandably so, by the way, on both sides. And the misinformation, the deliberate propaganda and all the rest of it is immense. Like you just mentioned then, for example, Israel decapitated babies, didn't you?
Yeah.
Has that actually been proven? And this sounds so awful because I'm not trying to split hairs in any way, shape or form, but the notion of a decapitated baby
It's a really unfortunate
is so
phrase about...
repulsive, and rightly so, by the way. It repulses everybody. But is it true?
Yeah, it's not the phrase I would have used in describing it either, Michelle. But I think I believe it to have been proven, and I believe that the position taken by Israeli authorities was then, are you happy now that we've had to display our dead children for you to have your querying of our accounts verified? So yes, I believe that is true. But there is a flip side to that, which is that Aaron was rightly saying, concerning outbursts from politicians who should remember that we've got to look after free speech in the hard times, not just the easy times, and that's true. On the other hand, there are plenty of people who leapt on the account of Israel supposedly bombing a hospital before that was in any way verified, and it seems almost certain now that it was not Israel that did that. And have those members of Parliament retracted or even put a question mark over their statements? They have not.
See, I tell you what, because we are in an age now of advanced technology like never before. So the whole of artificial intelligence, the ease in which it is, you're able now to make something like your deep fakes, you're able to make something look so convincingly real when it is not. It is, it's scary actually, because everyone is so emotional. The second that you see something horrendous, we connect to that as human beings, and on we circulate it. And I think, to Richard's point, this whole kind of situation about what is true, what isn't true, the context around some of these things is extraordinary. This whole thing, the whole thing is just so distressing. It's almost too distressing for words, isn't it? And I don't see how it is going to end. It seems to be getting worse and escalating by the day as opposed to de-escalating. Keep your thoughts on that matter coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. Speaking of technology, I'm wondering, do you think that the police should be using facial recognition technology to catch thieves? Yes or no? See you in 2.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7. Alex Dean, the PR consultant alongside me, as is the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Now, I want to talk to you about technology, facial recognition, to be precise. That is now being used by the Met Police to help catch shoplifters in stores in London. It's quite complicated, some of this technology, but there's been a suggestion, I think by the policing minister, that people's passport photographs could be used in conjunction with this stuff to try and look at CCTV images and try cross-mapping to see who the criminals are to help speed up the capture of them.
There are two separate proposals on the table at once, and only one of them is currently enforced, worth people knowing. The first one is for our 12 kind of biggest leading retailers to pool their surveillance footage of people who've shoplifted from them hundreds of times and try and work out who are habitual offenders of the worst kind. And the second, at a ministerial level, is to use the passport data from everybody and use that to try and catch shoplifters, the truest sledgehammer to crack a nut. On the first one about habitual offenders, it seems to me that's one thing. It's a specified small group of people, and in the same way that, you know, pubs have always shared lists of their worst wrong-uns that you shouldn't, that are barred, and, you know, it's based upon convictions or at least multiple occasions when something's gone wrong for the retailer or the vendor. And there should be a route for you to appeal to be able to get off that list, but, you know, it's a small list. That's one thing. What some people in government have said about all people's data being used like this is completely different. To use our passport database, seems to me, is completely wrong. We would all be treated as presumed suspects. Contrary to my understanding of privacy or data ethics, data obtained for one reason would then be applied and used for another one. We gave the government that data so that we could travel, so that they would allow us to get a passport and travel. And to use data acquired for one purpose for another one, retrospectively, against us all and treat us all as suspected criminals is completely wrong.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, I entirely agree with that. I'd also say, adding to the very lucid analysis there by Alex, that we all make trade-offs. So sometimes we say, you know what, I'm not happy with this, it's bad. So, to some extent, it's an overstep by government, it's, you know, an infringement on my privacy, but it does something which is good and effective and makes my life better, is good for society. There is not a major issue with catching people who are guilty of shoplifting. The problem is nothing happens to them. And I'm sure all of your viewers, your listeners know this. Look in your local newspaper any day of the week. There'll be somebody who's gone to the local magistrate's court, or Crown Court, unlikely, magistrate's court, and they would have been found guilty of shoplifting repeatedly, suspended sentence. Nothing happens. So why on earth, just to build on what Alex was saying, would we allow such a massive infringement on our privacy simply so somebody can get a suspended sentence again? It seems absurd to me. It seems ridiculous. There is a problem with regards to shoplifting in this country. I think there's a two-pronged sort of response here. If somebody is stealing food or baby formula or nappies, I personally think that that person should be helped by the state, not punished by them. However, we also have to be honest, that's not everybody who shoplifts.
Well, a lot of people shoplift to order now. So if someone's got a baby, because formula is quite expensive, as are nappies. So if someone's got a baby and says, actually, do you know what, old Michael there, whoever, he'll go down there and he'll steal those for me, so actually I can spend my money on other things. How do you determine then, oh, actually, he's nicking it for his kid versus actually he's just stealing to order now? Yeah, well, I think if as a society we have a major problem with regards to thefts of baby formula and nappies, I think we need to be asking questions about how do we support families better.
But you're pointing to an issue about mitigation and sentencing, Michelle, and it would be very powerful mitigation for the mother of a hungry child to have shoplifted some baby formula. It would be less powerful mitigation for somebody to have shoplifted 10 times the amount of formula they would need for their own child, because because they're shoplifting it to order. And you might think, therefore, they would receive a more serious sentence. The system is able to deal with things like that. The trouble with the mentality beyond what you're talking about, which is a fair question, the trouble beyond it is with people who impose these things will argue, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And that is the biggest falsehood when the state has coercive powers. You say nothing to hide, nothing to fear to that guy who was wrongly acquitted of rape and spent the best part of 2 decades of his life in prison, is now living in a tent. The state, first of all, tried to charge him for the cost of going... Oh, that's all right, is it?
DNA.
It was cleared by... And you tell the people who are wrongly...
Technology cleared him.
Yeah, and people say, don't worry, the first time someone's convicted by this new tech, and people say, it never goes wrong. Right? But it has done in one of these cases. The same way that DNA never lies. And people... Excuse me, let me finish. People are convicted on DNA evidence, and people say, DNA's never wrong. And then you find out it's been cross-contaminated in the laboratory, and they took your sample given for the control, tested against the sample, and no doubt it comes back correct. Right? Happened in tons of cases. People were convicted time after time when DNA was a new technology, and people said, well, the system can't possibly be wrong.
What do you make to it all?
Nothing to hide, nothing to fear.
What do you make to it all at home? Would you also, for example, not just about facial rec, but, for example, if you had to have ID cards in the society, would you even support that? When it comes to shoplifting, 342,000 cases were recorded in the last year, and just 1 in 6 resulted in a charge. You can make of that what you will. Keep your thoughts coming in, GB Views at gbnews.com. I've got a lot coming your way. I want to talk to you about Welsh Water, what's going on there. BB Stockholm as well, apparently Migrant's back on there. Don't go anywhere, and I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani remain alongside me. Paul says, of course, facial recognition should be used. It's another asset for the police to use in the fight against terrorism. You say if a few robbers get caught as well, then win. That's got a tut, I think it was, from Alex. Martin says, Michelle, you won't catch shoplifters with facial recognition. This is not difficult. They will cover their faces with a mask or a scarf or whatever. So it is pointless, says Martin. Let me know your thoughts. Now over to Wales. Welsh Water. They have admitted now to illegally spilling untreated sewage at dozens of treatment plants for years. This is an interesting one for me, because I often feel that when you've got water stories and wrongdoing of water companies, the default answer is these greedy capitalist profit rinsing companies, nationalise them all. But Welsh Water is actually a not-for-profit, so this isn't what's going on and driving that organisation. What do you make to it all?
Well, I imagine it's the company that told us this has happened. Right? And one of the things that will happen if we carry on with this put them in the stocks attitude that some campaigners are urging...
No, the company was forced to admit to this after basically like a statistician went through with a fine-tooth comb and analysed all their stuff and then went over to the BBC and grassed them up. So the company had no choice but to go, oh, yeah, actually, yeah, we have been doing this.
Right. Well, look, my point is this. If we carry on down the road we're going, where people who run these companies are the pantomime villains of the day, first of all, no one will run a water company any longer. We're talking about people have been calling all today for criminal sanctions for those. It's not the boss didn't go down and open the sluice himself, right? And if we're going to make people individually, personally liable for actions like this one, when they are not in all sorts of other businesses or industries, let alone criminal situations, we don't send hardened, violent criminals to prison in this country on quite a regular basis. But if we're saying we're going to bang up a CEO because they're the pantomime villain du jour,
well, the book
seems to me to be wrong. Is that right? So let's say. So who's going to run the company? Let's say Fergal Sharkey is now appointed to run a water company. And next year, what happens? He's broken the law as well, because these companies are on a long old journey and they don't fix it overnight. Indeed, they don't fix the culture or the constant leaks and so forth in months or years. But you're going to bang Fergal Sharkey up now, are you?
Well, I don't know. Aaron, do you think the CEOs of these companies that are doing these kind of things, does the buck stop with them? Should they be ultimately accountable, and should that be criminal accountability?
Well, they're paid as if the buck stops with them. That's the main thing. I would say that the disincentives for this are too low, which is to say that it's too easy to do things which are illegal. Forget the things which are legal but bad, often highlighted by people like Fergal Sharkey, but which are illegal and very little happens. I think perhaps having them blacklisted from being company directors for several years might be a good way of doing it. I think larger fines on the companies themselves. But frankly, water in this country is just a complete mess. And
if you impose those things just on water companies, then talented executives will just go and do something else, and you'll wind up with the worst executives in the country.
Well, I think so this is an interesting point, and I think that's partly true. The problem is I think we've already got some of the worst executives in the country in rail, water. You don't find dynamic, talented people saying, I really want to shake up and solve the problems in this industry, in these privatised sort of games like water, energy and rail. So I think Alex has got a good point, but I think we're a million miles away from good people being there anyway.
You guys will have strong opinions on this, I am sure. Where does the buck stop in an organisation? Today we're talking about water, but of course it's much broader than that, is it? In charges, criminal charges, and what about Alex's point there? Well, all the good people are going to run then, aren't they? Or maybe they might just up the game and decide to act properly. I don't know. You tell me, GBviews at gbnews.com. I want to talk to you next about Bibby Stockholm. I was about to go to an advert, but guess what? I'm not going to go to one. What a treat for you all. You can sit with me instead, because Bibby Stockholm, you're all familiar with that by now. The migrants were taken off because of Legionella. Well, today they are back on, but I have to show you this clip. It's very bizarre. Just Stop Oil. You heard me right. They got involved with their 2 pence worth. Look at the state of this. So this is the coach apparently carrying some of these migrants to the Bibby Stockholm. Just Stop Oil, being Just Stop Oil, decided to sit in front of that coach and do their level best to stop it. I have to say, not very successfully, because the coach driver was having absolutely none of it. Carried on driving. There was a very hysterical tweet that followed, if you ask me, from Just Stop Oil. They reckoned that there was, I quote, I think it's intention to kill by the driver. I mean, come on now. I mean, where do we even begin with this, Alex?
I'll begin by saying this: from time to time, you'll get a perfectly kind of mainstream, normal account on Twitter come out with some vitriolic bit of abuse, and you realise the person responsible for running that corporate account has failed to log into their personal account in order to deliver their hate for the day. And that reminded me of this, because what is this to do with Just Stop Oil? Well, it's like they forgot to log out of their account, and they deployed the same individuals who do feel this way, and they're basically, you know, they hate the state being trying to control migrants and so forth. But you're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud. We're just dedicated to just stopping oil. Forgot to log out of the account. Sorry, I sent the wrong 20 activists down to try and stop a lorry.
Yeah.
So I thought if you don't like the accommodation we've got, you can lump it, is my view.
Intention to kill. I don't know if I can bring the tweet up. It says, we're saddened to report that we were unable to halt transportation of refugees to the prison. The prison, yeah, you did hear that right. The driver rammed through the block, risking killing those in front. We needed more people. We can't do this alone. Oh, do you know what? I nearly swore. Aaron, you go.
I'll save you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think many people agree with the aims of Just Stop Oil in terms of, in the long term, we need to get ourselves off fossil fuels. They might not agree with their tactics. And then many people will agree that, you know, perhaps the BB Stockholm isn't the best way to deal with refugees in this country. You know, people might agree or disagree with that. But I think, you know, the idea that these are somehow coterminous as causes, yes, they require the same protest tactics is quite strange to me. I mean, they could have just put on different T-shirts. And I mean, maybe it seems mean, but I don't really understand the strategic intelligence here of conflating the very important issues of getting off fossil fuels in the long term. I think that includes nuclear, personally, and having a sensible human rights-based immigration policy.
We disagree on that issue, especially about nuclear, but I've got to tell you, this reinforces for many people their worst view about Just Stop Oil, which is they're just a bunch of renter mob.
Well, yeah, and John says the next time someone calls Bibi Stockholm a prison, which is what the Just Stop Oil just called it in that tweet you'll be familiar with, John says the next time someone does call it a prison, please can you remind them that this barge was used to accommodate our forces personnel when down in the Falklands. So if it was good enough for troops, why all of a sudden is it not good enough for these people, migrants? That is a very, very fair point. Before I leave the show, I have to pick up a viewer conversation. Nick wrote in and asked me, Michelle, how do you cope doing your job? Because the news is so depressing, doom and gloom and all the rest of it. How do you manage your mental health? And I think that's a very fair point, Alex, because there is so much negativity going on in this world, isn't there? Sure. Do you find that? Do you feel...
I feel very positive about the world, and I feel optimistic about our future as a race and as a country. And when I would say race, I mean as a species. I think that our life expectancy has increased beyond everything our forebears knew. Level of education, level of life enjoyment, as well as expectancy. I think if you take the long-term view, you'll see actually our future is much brighter than people think.
Aaron, your thoughts?
I'm also very optimistic. Brilliant people are doing brilliant things every day. You just have to go and find the stories.
Yeah, and I think actually, you know, we can dip in and out of things. My job's slightly different because I do have to be absorbed morning, noon and night. And I am human, to Nick's comment there. It does affect me.
Yeah, I bet it does.
How can it not affect anybody to be looking all the time at, you know, children being murdered? There's no other word for it and all the rest of it. You know, and all you can do is to everybody's point.
One could be a coroner, one could be doing autopsies, one could be investigating serious offences for the police. In the end, we ain't down the pits.
Yeah, and there is a lot of good in this world, and to your point, we have to try and find it. And I have often said I would love to cover positive stories on this programme, so if anyone is aware of great positive things, or maybe you're doing stuff yourself in your own life, you can get in touch and let me know about that, because I'd be fascinated in doing that too. John, a different John, says about the water bosses, yes, they should be ultimately accountable. These people know what's going on in their organisations, and if they don't, then they've failed at their jobs anyway.
Good point.
He says they reap the benefits with their high salaries and bonuses, and if you want to take the pay, you have to take the responsibility, and thus you take the consequences. Ben says, can I just say, it's absolutely right and proper that any migrants that are put on the Bibi Stockholm should indeed be told by the government that if they refuse to board, they will indeed lose their benefits. That has divided people, but I have to say, I am agreeing with Ben. I think you said that you agreed as well. Do you agree with that if you don't get on the Bibi, you're going to lose your support?
Well, I think it's a stunt for the Conservative Party, but that's that's another conversation.
Why do you think it's a stunt for the Tories?
Well, I think they've just failed so massively on particularly legal migration. 600,000 people came into this country last year in terms of net migration. I think they're focusing on illegal migration, and I think Rwanda, Bibi Stockholm, I think fundamentally are about trying to conjure something in the media to save their poll ratings. I'm sure some people disagree. I think they view this as a political stunt rather than a long-term part of a successful immigration and asylum policy.
Kathleen says, why are these people not working? They should lose their benefits. But I don't know whether or not you mean the Just Stop Oil people or the people on... I don't know. There's a fine line. I don't know what's going on with the Just Stop Oil people. One thing I do want to say, though, I really hope that Just Stop Oil driver doesn't lose his job, because I bet my bottom dollar there'll be a campaign soon to try and make him do so. You know what? He's a hard-working guy trying to earn a living, support his family, trying to do his job, get people from A to B. Why do Just Stop Oil think that they somehow have the right to stop people going about their business? Aaron, that's all I've got time for. Alex, you too.
Thanks,
Don't go anywhere, guys. Thanks for joining us, Nigel Farage. Up next, night-night.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation.